So let's start with the static generation. Static generation can be done with and without data. All the pages you've created do not require fetching external data. Those pages will automatically be statically generated when the app is built for production. For some pages, you might not be able to render the HTML without first fetching some external data. Maybe you need to access the file system, fetch external API, or query your database at build time. Next.js support this case. You can call it static generation with data. So how does it work? In Next.js, when you export a page component, you can also export an async function called getStaticProps. Let me show you that function. Inside these pages, I'm going to create a new folder and I'm going to name this folder components. And inside this, I'm going to create a new file home.js. And inside this, here I'm going to export async function with the name getStaticProps. In Next.js, when you export a page component, you can also export an async function called getStaticProps. getStaticProps runs at build time in production. Inside the function, you can fetch external data and send it as a property to the page. So let's suppose that you have home component inside this page, then you can get your data from the API or from the file system and return that as a property to this home component. getStaticProps allows you to tell Next.js, hey, this page has some data dependencies. So when you pre-render this page at build time, make sure you resolve them first and pass all these properties to the page and generate that HTML. Let me show you a very simple example of getStaticProps. Inside this home.js, I'm going to first create this home component. So inside this home, let's suppose that I'm going to render JSX inside this parenthesis. I'm going to pass here empty bracket and I'm going to say h1. Inside this h1, I'm going to print the post data. So I'm going to call here post.title. I'm going to print title in this h1 heading tag, and in the paragraph, I'm going to print post.description. Now I'm going to get this data from the backend. Using this getStaticProps, we pass value to these variables. So what we need to do is we need to first get rid of these props right from here, pass here object, and then pass post. Now just after that, inside this export function, this export async function right down here, we need to first get the data from the backend. Right now I don't have any backend, so I'm going to just create an object here and paste that something like this. Now consider this as a backend request and you get the data from the backend inside this data variable. Now once you get your data inside this data variable, you're just going to return that data as a props from this function. So instead of this triple dot, I'm going to pass this data over here. Let me just change the name of this variable. I'm going to say here post, and I'm going to just pass this post data using these props. So here I'm going to get rid of this triple dot, pass here an object, and here I'm going to pass my post data. I'm going to just mimic a backend request here. So we just created an object here and pass that to the variable, and then we pass that variable to the props. So when the Next.js build, it will pass these values to these variables, because as you know, getStaticProps is run at build time. So whenever you build your application, this function will automatically execute and pass values to these pages, or you can say to this component. Let me save this file and wrap this in a layout. You can see we have here a layout component. Let me just use that for this home page. At the top, I'm going to import the layout. Let me check this path. I'm going to pass here layout component, something like this, and then I'm going to pass this layout to this home page. Now let me save these changes back to my browser, and here I'm going to say home. I'm going to have my header here, which is coming from the layout, and then we have the new post and the new post data. We also have the footer as well. Now you can notice we get this data from this getStaticProps. If I change this to daily tuition post, back to the browser and reload it, I'm going to get here daily tuition post. So by returning these properties to the page, this home component is going to get all these properties at build time. So when the application build, home component will get these properties from getStaticProp function. Later we'll understand how we can get this data from the backend. Just for the basic understanding, I'm using here an object. Now I hope you understand how you can work with getStaticProps in Next.js application.